What is on-the-nose dialogue?
So on-the-nose dialogue usually means your characters are saying everything that they're thinking. There is no nuance. There is no subtext. This can possibly be because, like, for me, I'm a very forward person when I speak, right? So now all of my characters are being very forward, but most people are not like that. Most people don't say what they mean or mean what they say. Most people don't speak very directly. Most people, shut down instead of telling you what their feelings are. Most people don't know how to tell you what their feelings are in the first place. So if you've got two characters in a scene and both of them can communicate effectively, then your screenplay's over because now they're not causing any problems for each other, right? The other part of that is, and I want to be careful when I say this, there's a little bit of poetry to writing dialogue, right? There are puns, and like a lot of the greatest dialogue that we think about are things that I probably would not have said that in real life. You know what I mean? So there is a little bit of that happens. And not everybody's good at that, and that's fine. I'm not necessarily all that great at it unless I'm writing like old Southern women or men. Then I can give them all the poetry there is, but that's because I grew up around those people, so I know the kind of poetry that they speak, right? But generally speaking, it usually just means that, on the nose literally means like you can't miss it. It's right there. And you want some of that dialogue to be far more nuanced so that you can play with everything else in the scene. The words don't have to tell us everything. So it's a little bit of show don't tell, right? The words don't have to tell us everything. How can we find out other things? Or how can you say this to me without saying it to me, right? So there's like this, I'm going to call it a meme. I don't think that's what it is. But, they say, tell me you're an 80s baby without telling me you're an 80s baby. Oh, well, one of my first concerts was The Temptations, which probably would make me like a 70s baby. But, I went with my parents. Right. So but that would be my way of saying that instead of just walking in and saying, I'm an 80s baby. I'd go, well, my first concert was Prince. And then people will probably go, oh, okay, you were probably born in the whatever time. So the same thing is true with your dialogue. Let's go back to our young lady who's cursing out her mother. How can she show her mother that she's upset with her without saying, I'm upset with you? That's how you're going to write dialogue that's not on the nose. That's how you're going to get the subtext. That's how you're going to get the nuance. So for example, one of the examples I love, and hopefully I can remember the name of this film, it's about cowboys and it's on Netflix. But the son asks the father, why don't you love me? And instead of the father saying, I love you, and here are all the reasons why, he tells a story about naming him. And it's because I gave you your name that we understand he loves him. He never says, I love you. He never says, no, son, you got to believe it. I love you. Instead, he tells this beautiful story about how he chose his name. That's subtext. That's nuance. That's not being on the nose. The on the nose response would be, I love you.
Is there a way to avoid on-the-nose writing?
If you're good at it, if you're good at dialogue, yeah. If you understand nuance and subtext, yeah. But I think generally speaking, when you're starting out, most people watch TV and watch films, and what they take from it is just the dialogue, and they're thinking it's more like a play where it's just you go, I go, you go, I go, you go, I go, right? And they're not necessarily considering how those words are pushing the story forward or how those words can make the reader feel as they're taking it in, because I always say the read is king. Someone's got to read it before it gets produced. They're not thinking about the pacing of it or how it could be dragging the story because they're in this conversation for so long. And I think that's something you have to learn over time. Some people might, like anything else, simply just be gifted at it, whether they know that they're gifted at it or not. Some people are just good at dialogue. But I think generally speaking, we've all written something on the nose before. With that being said, sometimes being on the nose is okay. Every single line of dialogue is not going to have subtext or no one's going to know what we're talking about, right? Like at some point you got to say it out loud, especially if you're writing something that's like science fiction or, something that's already pretty difficult for us to understand, like something political, etc. At some point, someone's just got to keep it simple and make it very plain about what's going on, or we're all going to be lost. So sometimes on the nose dialogue is okay, and you won't get that note about it. You might get a note that says, I need somebody to just make it plain. I need someone to just say it because we're all kind of lost in the sauce of what's going on here. There can be dialogue that's too poetic, right? Like it's so poetic that we aren't really having a conversation anymore, and we aren't really pushing the story forward anymore. We're just saying nice flowery things, right? So I think no matter what, unless again you've just got a natural knack at it, and some people do, that it takes a little while to figure out dialogue, especially because you're writing for so many characters, and not all of those characters are going to sound the same, talk the same, use the same cadence in their speaking, etc. And so I think it's a skill set that it takes a little while to kind of figure out.
How does a writer balance dialogue and action in a scene?
I think it depends on the scene. First of all, each scene is pushing your story forward. So that means each scene has a goal, like a little mini goal of the larger goal. If you don't know what that is, you can get lost in the sauce of your dialogue and your action, right? If you're writing features, features are pushed more by action than dialogue. That doesn't mean that I need to literally see more lines of action, but it may mean that there are more opportunities to remove dialogue because action can tell me what it is that they could have said. So like I said before, how can you show me that you're angry without telling me that you're angry, right? So instead of cursing mom out, I'm going to slam the door and walk out, right? So now you got a line of action instead of dialogue. I don't think that there's a particular balance that has to be made. It just depends on what's happening for the scene. I literally just gave a note the other day because we did a table read, so we were reading the script out loud, and the action was actually distracting because it wasn't necessary. What we needed to focus on were these people talking, because once it's getting shot, the director's going to give them blocking, right? So they're going to be moving around and they're going to do stuff. So it's not, or they won't, because we're just focused on their conversation. It depends on what the shot is and what they decide it's going to be. But sometimes the only action that you need is the scene description at the top, and you can just let the people go. That happens a lot more in television, right? Because television, these actors are together all the time. They've got a chemistry. The director is going to come in and give them the blocking. And so a lot of the times you don't see a lot of action in television episodes, right? You'll see it when it's necessary, as in like, we need her to pick up that cup. Therefore, the action tells her to pick up the cup. But other than that, you might not have as much action as you would in a feature because they're moving in a different rhythm in this TV series, right? So you don't have to tell them what they need to be doing all the time. So you just need to figure out, again, what am I writing? What is the format of what I'm writing? What's the genre of what I'm writing? In a horror, there might be more action because the action is also giving me all of the feels. You know what I mean? It's giving me all the jumps and the scares and the blah, 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 blah. And obviously in an action film, there's gonna be more action because you gotta write out those action scenes, etc. Whereas in a romantic comedy, maybe it won't have as much action, or in a comedy, maybe it won't have as much action depending upon what the comedy is, right? So you just kind of figure out what's necessary for you.
With the table read, did you do it again and just cut out the action?
No, because we do 3 writers and we do it in 2 hours. So really the point is for the writer to hear it out loud and make notes for themselves on what they may want to change when they go back for their revision. So it's kind of like a part of their revisions process, right? So we talked about earlier, first drafts, second drafts, etc. Something else you can do is listen to it out loud, right? And I would suggest doing a table read versus using any of the technology that has it play back for you, because then you don't get the rhythm, right? So if it's a computer voice, that's what I'm going to, AI, right? Then the cadence is not the same, right? So now you're not hearing it how you intended it. And then also a lot of AI may not know what to read and what not to read on the page, and screenplays have all kinds of stuff on the page. And so now again, it's messing up the rhythm because it's reading parentheticals and it's reading all kinds of stuff, right? But in a table read, I have the actors read the action and the dialogue and the scene headings, because as the writer, you need to hear, okay, they're in the mall and they're walking and they're having this conversation. Does this work? Right? Is the rhythm working for me? Is, the amount of action? And so this particular script that we were reading was a decently, well put together screenplay, but it was just every now and again, I could feel the writer inserting himself a few times to give me a little action. And it's like, yeah, I don't need that, because now that's dragging the read, right? And you pull that out and I just want to be listening to these people talk, and that's it, because it's, again, was TV. So it's like, we're going to get out of here and get into the next scene. So it's not about having 4 or 5 pages. I would never suggest anybody have 4 or 5 pages of only dialogue, right? There's got to be some action in there because it's on the screen, it's pushed by action, right? But generally speaking, sometimes it's just, hey, we're in the mall and we're walking and we listen to them walk and talk, and we don't need to have any other action unless they're stopping at a store, picking up a bagel, whatever it is they're doing. You know what I mean?
Unless it's Al Pacino in a courtroom scene.
Right.
Maybe that, maybe 4 pages,
maybe.
yeah, there. But
Yeah.
but yeah, other.
And even
others.
then, it's going to be interrupted with juror number 1 looks to the side. You know, it's going to be interrupted by something, even if it's not Al Pacino's action. You know, it's the judge leans back. You know, like you're going to get something else to just kind of disrupt that flow of all of the dialogue.
And I think it's great too when you talked about an AI voice versus a human. Too, if you see an actor possibly struggling with something, that's going to tell you too that maybe the audience will struggle with it.
Yep, exactly. Or that the reader will struggle with it, or that the actual actor will struggle with it. And you'll realize that even though wherever it is that you're from or with your friends, you guys speak this way. And so for you, you know exactly what that means and you're able to read it. And then you get someone else come in and they have no idea what the context of this is and they're flubbing over it. And you don't want actors to flub, right? You want them to just be able to read and go. And so you can take all of those notes for yourself and go, okay, I need to check on that line. Okay, that line it's a compound, complex sentence and it's not working. Maybe I need to make it a little more simple. You know what I mean? Get to make those kind of notes for yourself. So it's great to hear your words out loud.